Hey everyone. So this is going to be a rant episode. This is my big what is utility post that I'm going to talk about. And yeah, it's going to get, it's basically I dive into my opinions about what economics is and what it should be. Economics as a field gets a lot of really bad publicity for being wrong, for only measuring things in terms of dollars and cents, for being heartless, for being, for the most part, ambiguous. Um, you know, will this make the economy go up and down? And the economist says maybe. And like, yeah. So most of these bad reputations are simply because there's a couple things. First, people don't understand the limits of economics and what it's actually capable of. And I encourage people to realize that economics is a new field. So, again, I don't think Adam Smith was an economist. I think he was a philosopher. And my analogy or allegory, I wasn't an English major. I don't know which ones I are. But Aristotle, he was a Greek philosopher, and everyone calls him a philosopher. And he was the person who discovered the atom. And by discovered, I mean he sat around and he's like, what happens if you take a rock or a piece of wood and you break it in half, and you break that in half and break that in half and break that in half? Eventually, does it break forever, or at some point is there a finite piece, a limit to how far you can break something in half before you reach the smallest particles in the universe? And in doing so, he philosophized the existence of the atom. 2,000 years before. 3,000? It was a long time ago. Before the atom was actually captured in the early 1900s. So people don't call him a nuclear physicist. They call him a philosopher. And so for the same reason, I don't call, again, me personally, I don't think the long line of economists from before the field really existed are, in a scientific matter, are economists. I think they're philosophers. That's just my personal opinion. And so Adam Smith and Marx and basically anything before the 1950s that was not backed up by math, in the same way that Aristotle's theory about the atom was not backed up by science. And so to then sit there and say that Adam Smith was wrong, or it's the end of capitalism, or any number of things, I think is misconstruing the field and misconstruing what it is. So those people were very, very smart, and they should get a lot of credit for bringing economic thoughts and opinions into the mainstream, and really, I mean, in a lot of ways, inventing the field of economics. But in the same way that Aristotle did not discover the atom, I don't think Adam Smith was the founder of economics either. So me personally, I think it really started in the 50s when statistics econometrics really blossomed. So if you think about it from that perspective, the scientific method when it comes to, for example, math and physics had started in the 1600s, 1500s, 1400s. I mean, there was hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years for the field to develop before the physicists got to the point where they discovered the atom. And then, they discovered the atom in the early 1900s, and then it took another 100 years for them to discover the Higgs boson. And if you think about it, it's possible that economics may be able to solve a lot of these answers. When people ask, with specificity, how can we use economics to predict behavior in a very specific way and get correct answers? It's possible that the field is just too young, that we haven't invented the tools and techniques that we as economists need to adequately give answers. And if you think about it, we're really 60 years in. If going by my measure, we started in the 1950s, we're about 65 years into the field. 65 years into, math gets you to the 1700s. So, the Higgs boson, governments spent, many Nobel prize winners, years of work and billions and billions and billions of dollars to make these discoveries. I think if you created a lab in CERN and dedicated it to economics and gave it like $40 billion, I bet you'd have some advancements in the field as well. So that's my shtick. So that's the first part. And the second part is that a lot of, to address the second point, is that it's they call it the dismal science, and they everything has to be in dollars and cents. And so I want to talk about how economics measures things, and it's very very important to understand this, because a lot of times people say that you can only measure the economic impact of something, and you can't you can't measure other stuff. And to me, I always say that's not true. You actually can measure anything with economics. You just have to do it right. You just have to have that. You just have to apply economics correctly to the situation. So the biggest way to do that is what economists call utility. So obviously, if you're trying to measure how much someone's going to get paid, you can do that in dollars and cents. But how do you measure the happiness someone has? And that's it's a much more difficult question. And in a lot of ways, it requires using what economists again call utility. And it's this kind of amalgamation of a bunch of different ideas and theories. And I'm going to talk a lot more about modern economic utility theory later when we get to Kahneman Tversky's paper. I want to make sure I get this right. Prospect Theory and Analysis of Decision Under Risk from 1979, which was really maybe the birth of behavioral economics. That paper, it's a seminal paper. It's a great paper, but it basically deals with fixing the wrongs of the assumptions that early economists made in the early years of the field. And the most basic assumption is, honestly, it's straight from Adam Smith, basically, that people are rational creatures and supply equals demand, and that I'll give you the perfect example, and I love this hypo. So the Adam Smiths, the Econ 101s of the world start by saying that everyone's rational, and they do that because it's simple, because the economics as it stands doesn't have the tools to deal with the complexity of human behavior, because we're weird, we're random, and we're complex, and we have all these different variables going on because our brains work basically in parallel. They don't work in serial, they work in parallel. So, when you're trying to, economics is hard enough as it is, and so you can't deal with all the complexities of human beings. So if you tell, your Econ 101 hypo, a person sees $5 lying on the street, will they pick that $5 up? And basically, you just say, well, $5 is more than no dollars. People are rational and want to increase their even if you want to. Usually let's do it in dollars and cents, but let's just assume that they're advanced enough to be talking in terms of utility, and they say humans get more utility from $5 than they do from no dollars, so the human picks up the $5. And that one, that in theory is very, very simple. And framing things in terms of utility is very useful, because usually that utility ends up being in dollars and cents because you have to compare apples to apples. But just this idea that when we're trying to, especially in behavioral economics, figure out what decision someone's going to make, you have to run the calculus of what is worth more to that person. Now, in my opinion, there is a rational way to make that calculation. From an economic perspective, there's a way to account for all the variables. And in some of those variables include human unrationality. That's like a very important point, that you can have a rational model of economics that takes into account the irrationality of human behavior, and that can be built in, and it makes sense. So in that same example I just gave, let's give that hypo. This time, so you're trying to, again, you can make the assumption that humans want to maximize their utility, and I think a lot of times, again, I'm just going to rephrase this point just so it makes sense before I get to this hypo. Economics assumes that people are rational and do things in their best interest. And what I argue, and what behavioral economics would argue, is that people are rational and do things in their best interest, but their ideas of what actually is rational and what is in their best interest is in fact irrational, and does not make sense, and that's okay. But they go about these things in a predictable, rational way that you can calculate. So let's take that same example. You're walking down the street, you see $5, but this time you're walking with two friends on either side of you. Very important people. One of them is a cutie who maybe you have a crush on. And you're walking down the street and you see the $5, and you're thinking about just picking it up because $5 is more, and your life utility is increased by picking up the $5. The two friends turn to you, and one goes, "You're not gonna pick that up, are you?" Now the $5 bill in question happens to be crumbled and appears to have some sort of mud on it. And the second person says, "Oh, that could be poop. Like, you're not the type of person who would pick up like dirty things on the street, right?" And they both turn and look at you. Most people in that situation, depending how poor you are, if you want to make it $1 instead of $5, whatever. But most people would go, "Oh no, I'm definitely not the type of person who would do that." As you look around and then you walk away, and that's social pressure. That's so you are leaving $5 out there, and to the economists in the 1950s who, again, invented the field, that is impossible in the economic reality of stuff. And one of the big things that Kahneman and Tversky did was they started to think about utility in a broader sense. We're not just talking about, oh, I have more money and therefore life is better. We're talking about adding in other variables. So that the variable that was missing in that calculation was not whether you have $5 or not $5, but whether you have $5 or not $5 plus what type of social utility am I getting. There is an inherent value in the people around us thinking that we are good or being on good social terms, and we are insanely social creatures. We will do almost anything for social validation. I mean, the amount of money and effort people put in to being accepted by their peers, I don't even have to, that's like 80% of all society, basically, it's confrontations. It's just people trying to be accepted by other people and just have everyone, like them or not like them or think they're cool or not think they're cool or whatever social thing that's going on. We are insanely social animals. And that has a value that should not be overlooked. Just this idea that the only thing that matters is dollars and cents, and the human part of it, the human calculus, what drives humans is just ignored in economic models. Of course, you're going to get economic realities that are different than what the predictions are. You're missing a huge chunk of the economic calculus that's going on in a person's head. And that's not rational. It's emotional. So my argument for economics is not that it's broken or inherently wrong or it's the end of capitalism or any of that stuff. It's just that this whole time, traditional economics has only been looking at the rational part of the brain. Over here, that's yes, $5 more than not, and I'm going to work for this job because it pays me more, and that's just the whole field has been operating, in the 1950s with one hand tied behind its back because that's not how humans make decisions. Really, it's two hands. It's that part, okay, and then that part gets completely ignored, and the emotional part of the humans takes over, and the emotional part is what's the value? What's my life value? I want to be able to work from home. I want to take less pay, which again would be completely irrational, but have, more leisure time. And even traditional economics, was able to account for that by giving a dollar value to leisure. But it's more than that. It's utility. It's emotional connection. It's all these different factors. Now, I'm not saying that currently economics has the tools to capture these all correctly. And if you do, you will win a Nobel Prize, right? If I had all the answers, I'd win a Nobel Prize. And I don't have all the answers. But starting in 1979 with prospect theory by Kahneman and Tversky, this sort of thing has started rolling. And in fact, a lot of Nobel Prizes have gone out for research in this field to help economists, to give economists the tools to capture some of these strange human-y behaviors, and using the idea of utility as a broad concept to capture the value that humans have. So in the case I gave about picking up the dirty dollar, the poop $5, you know that that concept, if you actually do the true economic calculus, if you actually create an economic model that's accurate to humans, you have the $5, and then you have the social part, and the social part is worth more. It's more valuable to you to preserve your social status. And if you pick it up, like they'll be mad with you, but it's not like they're going to be like, I'm never talking to you again, right? Like it's not like you're like destroying your entire social network if you pick up. Just the thought that these people would look down upon you is worth more than $5 or $1 or whatever, whatever there's a Y value. It's on a slope somewhere, and so like wherever you fall on that in that function, but like that is really strong and really really valuable. I can't even. It's yeah. So to discount that would be a huge mistake. So when we talk about behavioral economics, we're going to talk a lot about utility as an idea, as a function, and just know that it's not perfect. And it's not even close to perfect, but it's not a limitation of economics. It's just a limitation of where economics is in the future. So I think that as economics moves forward, it's going to get better and better and better and better. But just know that as we talk about different studies and we talk about, like in the last episode I talked about how people have a willingness to pay, with a desk, with a chair. And when we're talking about buying and selling physical objects, that works. That's okay. That's like a thing that you don't really need a whole lot of utility for. Though, of course, utility functions would be very useful there. But once we start talking into decision making, especially behavior, it gets a lot harder to measure. So when it comes to utility, yes, you can measure it in dollars and cents. Of course, that works. But, there's a lot of other ways to measure it, and it's not perfect. So, I'll just do what the economists do, and, that will hopefully be enough. But just know that it's not going to be perfect. Now, I'm just going to end. I want to make sure I'm not missing anything in particular. When I post the blog post, you should go look, because I posted some of the original economics, and this isn't like an appendix. This was like in the main section of the 1979 prospect theory paper of what it actually looks like, what an economic theory looks like. And it's like mostly variables and will terrify all of you. So just know that, I did a bunch of work. So thank you all for watching, and I hope this is illuminating. One more thing I want to say is that the basic idea of the $5 bill that you pick up with dirt on it was from something I actually saw at the University of Madison. I remember walking, I believe, to a basketball game, and there was a row of houses, and there's a row of houses, and lots of people are, it's a Saturday game day, lots of people are on the patios, up at the decks, 3-4 stories tall on all sides, and everyone's milling around, and there on the ground is either $1, $5, I'm not exactly sure what it was, okay? And someone sees it, it's crumpled up, and it wasn't me, but it wasn't even my group of friends, but it was off around. Someone sees it, and they reach down, and they pick it up, and as soon as they pick it up, literally, I swear to God, like 1,000 people on like 7 houses with all the porches and patios, all totally full with like 20 people in each patio, turn and like start like yelling and laughing and like jeering because it was a poop dollar. Someone had pooped on the dollar and put it on the ground and then was waiting for someone to pick it up. And the person was like, they dropped it. And then they walked away. And then all the other people, the whole group, they all pretended that they weren't paying attention and would wait for like the next person to walk around the block and pick it up. So yeah, so that's the inspirational story. That is a true story. And it just goes to show that when you're calculating utility, maybe just assume that humans are not rational creatures and things happen for weird reasons. So thank you all so much for watching. I hope this video did not get cut off because I went a little long, and I will talk to you all later.